Have you ever had the experience with a poem where it doesn't matter how many times you've read the actual poem, that there's just that one line that seems to make you cry, and you don't even really know the reason? It's just like something inside of you swells up and it fills a gap that you didn't even know was there. I think that poetry is able to do this because of tone. A lot of people mention tone, but what exactly is it and how do we create it? Simply put, tone is the style, mood, or atmosphere that a certain piece of writing exudes. And it's not something that you can directly point to in the poem, but it's there. You know it's there, you can feel it. And it's this kind of ephemeral nature that makes it just so difficult to actually pen down. So as writers, how do we actually construct tone? And more than that, what do we need to know about tone in order to use it to our own advantage? First, we need to know that whether or not we're even aware of it, that we're actually using tone all the time in our writing. There are already certain qualities and emotions existent in our writing. This is due to the intuitive nature of writing, which guides us to make one choice over another, thus impacting the overall tone of the writing. And that's my point, that tone is constructed through choice. Tone is established by a culmination of all the choices we make when writing. So today I'm going to provide you with a list of a few different tonal choices that we actually have available to us when we're writing our poetry. Finally, at the end of the video, I'll provide some prompts that you can use in order to start practicing using tone in your writing today. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Number 1, point of view. Now this way of crafting tone goes largely unnoticed, especially by newer writers, but it can be a really great way of adding nuance to your poetry, as well as kind of subtly shifting the tone of your overall piece. So the narrative voice involves first person, second person, or third person, and depending on which kind of perspective that you use will have an impact on the level of intimacy that the reader has when they're actually experiencing your poem. As a general rule, first and second person perspective can be great for creating an intimate experience for the reader, and it also allows for a very natural kind of inclusion and opportunity for emotionally charged language. Third person then can provide a more kind of objective handling of the subject matter, because then the speaker is abstracted from the poem. So it just provides more space. The next way to shift point of view is to actually play with time, including tenses. So we have obviously past, present, or future tense. It's really good to kind of be aware of what tense you generally gravitate towards. Obviously, how the tense actually interacts with your subject matter is very variable. And so I can't really make any general kind of claims or statements about what effect it's going to have on the writing. Ultimately, I bring this point up because you should just keep the tense of your poem in mind, and if at any point you feel as though the material has gotten stale, you could try switching up the tense to see if it kind of reanimates purpose of your subject matter. So the narrative voice along with the word tense are two really easy and simple ways that you can dramatically impact the tone of your writing. Number 2, word choice. Words are not only the substance of our poetry, but it's also the spirit of each idea that you present. The manner in which you describe details in your work actually has an influence on how the reader then interprets the images in your work. Additionally, it directs the reader's attention to select qualities about certain objects. So in this way, you're actually guiding the reader's interpretation of the subject matter through subtext. Now, you don't want to be too heavy-handed. You need the reader to have space so that they can come to their own kind of experience when reading your work. However, you shouldn't underestimate how subtle changes of words can drastically impact the overall meaning of your poem. Choosing one word over another is the practice of refining your ideas and using precision when you're communicating. So I'll give you an example. So say you're writing a poem and you wanted to describe something like this paperweight. Okay? So first, you have to pick out which detail is actually worth sharing, and then how it connects to your poem's overall theme. So say you think it's the shape that actually relates to and kind of says something about the nature of time. Yes, it's round, but you could also say it's a sphere, it's a ball, or you could say it's a globe or an orb. So depending on which word that you choose will have a different kind of cognitive association that it creates in the mind of the reader. So a sphere is an abstract representation, and so it can denote a kind of observative or scientific mood. A ball can be a more neutral kind of descriptor because it's used to describe so many different things. The use of the word globe is heavily associated with talks of the world, and so in this case, it could be used to denote something about travel, or maybe some other quality that touches on global community and time. An orb is generally associated with descriptions of phenomenons in space, or with objects approximating the metaphysical, and so it could provide a more kind of mystic tone in your poetry. All of this to say that when you start conceptualizing words to this level of attention, you are in fact concerning yourself with crafting tone. Now, the meaning of words and their associations is not the only way that you can actually craft tone. There is also the sonic quality of words. And word length is one way that we can start developing the sonic quality. So we have monosyllabic words, which can be quick or blunt, and they can be very concise and matter-of-fact. On the other hand, polysyllabic words actually allows the reader to linger, and they create a very lofty kind of meandering line. You obviously get to decide how you want to strike the balance between the two, depending on what effect you want the piece to have. So the overall length of your words is yet another way that you can actually evoke an emotional response or feeling from the reader. And all of this then leads us to the next way that we can actually craft tone. Number 3, sonic structure. So the mixture of sounds that are actually populating our lines is what makes up sonic structure. Now there are two kind of mental frameworks that you can use when you actually try to measure sonic structure in poetry. In this section I'm going to talk about the first method, which is an intuitive and loose method. And this involves looking at the actual quality of the sounds that you're using and determining how they actually relate to one another. So on the one end of the spectrum you have harmonious, soft, and kind of flowing sounds that creates the sonic structure commonly referred to as euphony. And this is usually the flowing use of vowel sounds as well as soft consonant sounds. This can be achieved by using mostly polysyllabic words whose syllables actually kind of echo and harmonize amongst one another within the lines of verse. On the other end of the spectrum, we then have cacophony, which is described as kind of harsh or discordant or jarring sounds. This involves the use of hard consonants along with a lot of monosyllabic words. Obviously, when you write lines, you're going to be using a mixture of both. But depending on what kind of mood you want to inhabit, then you can lean on one more than the other. So it's a very useful thing to be aware of that that's an option for you. In fact, I think the sonic quality of language is probably its most powerful feature. Once you understand how to use it, it really does evoke so much feeling. Aside from cacophony and euphony, there are more kind of specific ways to conceptualize sonic structure in poetry, which leads us to our next and final point. Number 4, formal structure. This precise way of cultivating tone in our poetry can be achieved when we look at the structure of our lines in terms of meter and syllabic patterns. Now, even if you write in blank verse and you choose not to follow traditional forms, your poetry still has meter and syllabic patterns. You just might not be aware of it. For this category, I really urge you to think of formal structure as a tool available to you so you can double check your lines, rather than a framework that you have to rigidly follow as you're writing the first few drafts of your poem. We want to use structure to enhance our work, not hinder our work. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of meter and syllabic patterns. So meter is a way of measuring time in poetry. It counts the beats made up by the syllables in our lines. So a poetic foot contains 2 or 3 syllables, and then a line of verse is actually measured by how many feet they contain. And this can range from 1 foot all the way to 8 feet. And that brings me to talking about line length very briefly. So line length is how you actually control the speed at which the poem is visually read. And this then impacts the pacing of how images are then delivered to the reader. So speed and pacing actually helps to develop emotion, mood, and tone in our writing. So if you want the reader to occupy a space of contemplation, you need to craft long and spacious lines. If you want to evoke swiftness or anxiety, then use short lines. What kind of line lengths you should be using in your poetry can have a profound impact on how you actually develop and reflect your subject matter. So it's a very important kind of thing to keep in mind. So as mentioned before, a poetic foot consists of 2 or 3 syllables, and each syllable is either stressed or unstressed. And so a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables is what is referred to as a syllabic pattern. So here are some common syllabic patterns. There are a few others outside of these, but we have iambic, trochaic, anapestic, dactylic, and amphibrachic. So each one of these syllabic patterns naturally cultivates an emotion amongst the lines. Iambic is considered the most emotionally stable because it most closely reflects our actual speaking patterns. Trochaic is the inverse, and so it creates a kind of unstable tone. The other 3 use 3 syllables, and so they actually allow for more opportunity for a flowing repetition of sound. So again, subtlety, mixing, balance, it applies here as well, because you have the opportunity to choose how you're going to mix these patterns and kind of mirror what your subject matter is going for, what mood you're trying to inhabit for the reader. And I'll say the most important thing about formal structure is that you have to make it invisible to the reader. You want them to be able to experience the poem without any interruptions. You don't want them to notice what you're doing. So that covers everything today about form and structure. Now here are a few writing prompts and reflection exercises that you can use in order to practice what we've covered about tone in today's video. And for all of these, I'll actually have it in the description if you want to copy and paste it. That's probably a good way to go about it. But I'll just go through and read these. Point of view: take a previous poem you've written and try rewriting it in a different perspective. How does it change the mood that surrounds your subject matter? Write one new poem describing your favorite room or a favorite place to visit. Try writing about the room or place 3 separate times with 3 separate voices. Pay attention to what options you have available to you with each version of the poem. Look over a few of your poems. Make note of which tense they usually use, either past, present, or future. What do these choices communicate about the poem? Would a change of tense enable you to explore the subject matter in a more nuanced or creative way? So next we have some word choice prompts. Pick one abstract idea you want to explore. Select one object in your home. Now describe your object at length in such a way that the language refers to and denotes the abstract idea that you are trying to explore. Never mention the abstract idea only use inference or subtext to give your object meaning. Take a poem you've already written, circle the words that contain emotional weight or value. Make note of what the overall emotional experience those words are creating, whether it be a feeling of apathy, joy, regret, suspense, bitterness, etc. Now try to replace those words with a different tonal experience. Afterwards, look and see how this tonal shift alters the meaning of the poem's subject matter, whether it is jarring or it creates an interesting subject. So with that one, I just want to clarify, think of it like with the paperweight example when I was describing the different words you could use to describe the shape. Try and do that for your poem and see if that kind of brings anything out. Next we have sonic and formal structure. Look over your past poetry. Do you find that you like to use a lot of euphony or cacophony in your writing? Why do you think this is? Do you think those choices best reflect your subject matter? If you find that you tend to favor soft sounds over harsh sounds, or vice versa, try practicing the opposite. So write some lines that are outside of what you typically gravitate towards. This will help to develop your emotional range and control. Take a poem you've already written and try to scan them to see their metrical foot. What kind of syllabic patterns do you typically use? Could you switch up the patterns to write more lyrically or to evoke a different emotion in your work? Finally, if you want to practice syllabic patterns, you could practice by writing genre poems, like an Italian sonnet or a villanelle. Or you could even come up with your own pattern that you want to try writing. Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time to learn about poetry. I really hope that this information has been helpful for you and that you've gained something out of this video. These aren't all of the ways that you can write tone in poetry, but I thought that this was a good place to start, and I can also obviously cover more of those ways in the future. As always, if there's anything that you need clarified that I covered here today, just let me know. I do have a few other videos that go over kind of poetry, the craft of writing poetry, so definitely check those out. Also, let me know if you actually use the prompts and if you found them helpful or useful or interesting. Any of that. And so let me see. Yeah, even if it just makes something click, I like to hear about that. So I guess that's everything for now. So take care.